I never told my son Brady about my $48,000 monthly salary. I chose to live simply instead. When he nervously invited me to meet his fiance's wealthy parents, I decided to see what kind of people they really were by showing up as a struggling retiree. But the moment his future mother-in-law said, "These leftovers are perfect for you, Peter. Take them home," I knew exactly who they were. And when their credit cards got declined, they never imagined that the poor old man they had just humiliated was actually the one holding all the power. Listen closely. Let me tell you who I am. Before I reveal who I really am, let me know. What city are you listening from? And have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who judged you too quickly? My alarm buzzed at 5:30, just like it had every morning for the past 20 years. I rolled out of my narrow bed feet, hitting the cold hardwood floor of my modest Denver apartment. No fancy marble tiles here, just honest wood that creaked with age and character. I shuffled to my small kitchen past furniture that most people would donate to Goodwill. My coffee maker was older than my son's pilot career, but it still brewed a decent cup. As steam rose from my chipped mug, I glanced at the stack of mail on my counter. Bills, mostly nothing that screamed executive lifestyle. What those bills didn't show was the direct deposit that hit my account every month. $48,000, enough to buy a mansion in Cherry Hills Village, drive a Tesla designer suits. Instead, I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and shopped at Target. My neighbors probably thought I was just another retiree scraping by. The truth was more complicated. As regional director of Rocky Mountain Renewable Energy, I oversaw wind farms from Colorado to California, managed budgets that could fund small cities. But when I came home to this apartment, I was just another guy in faded jeans. My phone rang as I was buttering toast. Brady's name flashed on the screen. "Morning, Dad." My son's voice carried warmth, but something else, too, nervousness. "Hey, kiddo, you're up early for a pilot. Actually, that's why I'm calling." He paused. "Sailor's parents are visiting this weekend. They want to meet you." I set down my coffee. "That's nice. I'd like to meet them, too. They're successful business owners. Restaurant group, 8 locations." Another pause. "Dad, just, dress nicely." "Okay." Saturday couldn't come fast enough, but every passing hour gave me time to think. And the more I thought, the more curious I became. I wasn't nervous about meeting Sailor's parents. I'd shaken hands with billionaires, negotiated deals in boardrooms that looked like movie sets. What intrigued me was how they would treat me when they thought I was ordinary, when I wasn't introduced as a man of wealth or title, but just Dave and Brady's father. All week I went about my usual routine. I'd walk to the local market, chat with the cashier who always told me about her grandkids, pick up my groceries, and drive home in my 10-year-old Honda Civic. It rattled when I turned corners, but it ran smooth enough. When Friday rolled around, I decided I wouldn't change a thing. No fancy watch, no pressed suit, no expensive bottle of wine. Just my old brown jacket, clean jeans, and the box of oatmeal cookies I'd baked myself, the same recipe Clara used to make every Christmas. That night I called Brady back. "You sure your future? In-laws won't mind a man with homemade cookies instead of fine wine?" I asked with a soft chuckle. He laughed, but there was that nervous edge again. "Dad, they'll be fine. Just, you know how they are. Appearances matter to them. Mom would have told you the same thing." His words struck something deep in me. Clara would have reminded me to be patient, to smile through other people's ignorance. She always believed kindness was the sharpest mirror you could hold up to pride. "I'll behave," I said simply. "Promise." When the call ended, I leaned back in my chair and looked around my apartment. The place was small, quiet, but honest. Every scuff on the wall, every dent in the furniture had a story behind it. That's when I realized I wasn't doing this to embarrass them. I was doing it for Brady. He needed to see who these people truly were before tying his life to them. The next morning I opened my wardrobe and studied my choices. 2 jackets, one tailored, navy blue, the other worn and faded at the cuffs. I picked the second. It felt more like me, the version they'd be meeting. By 6 that evening, I was on my way, driving through Denver's clean, tree-lined streets until the skyline gave way to manicured neighborhoods, gates, stone driveways, lawns that looked too perfect to walk on. When I turned into the address Brady had texted, I almost laughed. Their house wasn't a house, it was a statement. A white marble mansion with glass panels, tall columns, and a fountain in the front yard big enough to drown my Honda. I parked between 2 Teslas, cut the engine, and sat for a moment. My reflection in the windshield looked tired but calm. My old brown jacket, the faint silver in my beard, the box of cookies on the passenger seat. Everything about me said ordinary. I smiled. Let's give them the show they expect. As I stepped out, the crisp evening air brushed against my face. The door swung open before I could knock. A tall woman stood there, draped in diamonds and perfume that hit like a wall. "You must be Brady's father," she said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe in half a second. "I'm Cynthia. Please come in." Her tone was sweet, but her smile didn't touch her eyes. Behind her, a man, Sailor's father, stood in a crisp designer suit, arms crossed, lips thin. "Pleasure to meet you," I said politely, offering the box of cookies. "Just something small I brought along." Cynthia blinked, then gave a tight smile. "Oh, how thoughtful. I'm sure the staff will appreciate them." The staff. Not we, not thank you, just the staff. That was the first sign. As I stepped inside, my shoes clicked on polished marble floors that probably cost more than my car. A chandelier hung above, glittering like a warning. The smell of expensive wine filled the air. Brady and Sailor came down the staircase hand in hand. He looked relieved to see me. She, kind and warm, genuinely smiling. That small gesture told me she might be different from her parents. "Dad," Brady said, coming over to hug me. "Glad you made it." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, patting his shoulder. Cynthia glanced at my jacket again, her nose twitching slightly. "We don't usually do casual dinners, but I suppose tonight's special." I smiled, pretending not to notice the jab. Special indeed. As we all moved toward the dining room, I could already feel the tension. Their tone, their glances, the subtle way they measured me, every detail screamed judgment wrapped in politeness. But that was fine. I'd seen arrogance before, and I knew exactly how to handle it. That night I wasn't Davin the executive. I was Davin the simple father, and soon they were going to show me exactly who they were. The dining room looked like something out of a magazine. Long mahogany table, polished silverware, crystal glasses that caught the chandelier's glow and shattered it into 1,000 points of light. Everything screamed wealth and pride, but it was the kind of wealth that needed to be seen, the kind that spoke louder than the people sitting in it. Cynthia, Sailor's mother, took her seat at the head of the table. Her husband, Martin, sat beside her, posture sharp as a blade. Brady and Sailor sat opposite me, their hands linked under the table, nervous smiles hiding tension. As I sat down, Cynthia looked at me and said with that delicate smile of hers, "So, Davin, Brady tells us you're retired?" I nodded lightly, placing my napkin on my lap. "More or less. I do some consulting work here and there." "Oh?" she said, her brows lifting just slightly. "Consulting in what field?" "Renewable energy," I said casually, sipping water. "Wind farms, mostly." Martin let out a faint dismissive chuckle. "Ah, so manual labor? Installation and maintenance, I assume?" I met his eyes steady and calm. "Something like that." Cynthia laughed softly, shaking her head. "That's such honest work. We need more people like you. People who still know the value of hard work, not just chasing dreams above their pay grade." Brady shifted in his chair. Sailor's eyes widened slightly. She looked mortified. I smiled gently, pretending not to notice the insult. I suppose every kind of work has its worth. Dinner was served by 2 house staff, salmon glazed with lemon butter, roasted asparagus, and fine wine poured into everyone's glass except mine. Cynthia noticed and laughed softly. "Oh dear. I wasn't sure if you'd want the good stuff. I didn't think to ask." "I'm fine with water," I said politely, raising my glass. "Still does the job." Martin cleared his throat. "Brady tells us you live in the city. Must be quite a squeeze for a man your age." I can't imagine living without some space. I looked around the table, taking in the glint of gold flatware. "Space is nice," I said, smiling faintly, "but peace is better. My apartment gives me plenty of that." Cynthia tilted her head, eyes gleaming with polite pity. "That's admirable." She drew the word out like it was charity. Silence followed, the kind that hums underneath laughter and cuts through the air. Brady shifted again, ready to change the subject. "Mom, Dad." But Cynthia leaned forward, interrupting. "Brady, dear, have you thought about moving into something bigger once you're married? Sailor's used to a certain standard." My jaw clenched quietly, though I kept my smile. The woman hadn't even finished her meal, and was already mapping out my son's finances. Brady exhaled softly. "We'll figure it out, Mom." "Well," she continued, ignoring him, "perhaps you can ask your father for help. I'm sure he'd love to contribute, even a little something." The table went quiet. Brady's face flushed. Sailor bit her lip. I looked her in the eye and said evenly, "If my son ever asks for help, I'll be there. But so far he's done a fine job on his own." Her smile faltered. Just slightly. But it was enough. I took another bite of salmon, unbothered. I'd been judged before, by people richer, crueler, and far more powerful than this family. The difference was, those people earned their arrogance. These two just wore it. As dessert plates were cleared, Cynthia's tone softened again. "It's just lovely that Brady found someone from such good stock," she said, stroking Sailor's arm. "We've worked hard to build a name our daughter can be proud of." Her husband chuckled. "Yes, not everyone is fortunate enough to grow up surrounded by ambition." I leaned back, hands clasped, voice low and calm. "Ambition's good," I said, "but it means nothing if you lose your humility on the way up." For the first time that evening, Martin looked unsure how to respond. Sailor gave me a small, grateful glance, one that said, "Thank you for saying that." As the plates were cleared and the evening dragged on, their smiles thinned, their patience wore down, their politeness cracked at the edges. And I knew, sooner or later, the mask would slip completely. I didn't have to provoke it. Pride always exposes itself. And it did, faster than I expected. Dinner had stretched long enough for the air itself to grow heavy. The soft hum of the chandelier filled the gaps in conversation, the kind of silence that only happens when everyone's pretending. They're still enjoying themselves. Brady kept trying to pull the mood back to light-hearted chatter, but every time he did, Cynthia would steer it somewhere sharp again. Little questions, subtle jabs coated in sugar but meant to sting. Finally, dessert arrived, a flawless chocolate mousse served in crystal cups. As the plates clinked, Cynthia glanced toward me, her voice floating with practiced sweetness. "Davin, dear, I hope the portions aren't too big for you. I know older gentlemen like to keep things light." I smiled politely, spooning the dessert slowly. "I'll manage just fine, thank you." She nodded, then glanced at Sailor. "You know, darling, your fiancé's father reminds me so. Much of the workers we used to hire back when we opened our first restaurant, honest, simple men, content with little. There's something endearing about that." The words hit the table like glass breaking. Sailor froze. Brady set down his spoon with a quiet clink. Martin chuckled softly, clearly enjoying himself. Yes. Back then, everyone worked with their hands. These days, everyone thinks they're a CEO. I kept my voice calm, steady. "Working with your hands never made anyone less worthy, Martin. It's what built the world you're standing in." Cynthia blinked, lips curling faintly. "Oh, of course. I didn't mean it like that, Davin. I just admire your simplicity." That word again, simplicity, used like an insult, wrapped in fake praise. I looked down at my hands, calloused, not from poverty but from years of hard, honest work that even men like Martin could never comprehend. I'd built wind farms in the snow, climbed towers during storms, spent decades creating something that outlasted egos like theirs. Still, I said nothing, because I wanted to see how far their pride would go. When the last spoonful of mousse was gone, the server came to clear the plates. Cynthia reached for the serving tray, gathering the few untouched dishes. Then she turned to me, smiling in a way that wasn't kind. "These leftovers are perfect for you." "Davin," she said lightly, holding out the tray. "No sense letting good food go to waste. You can take them home." Brady's jaw dropped. Sailor's face went pale. "Mom," Sailor gasped. "That's—" But Cynthia interrupted, feigning innocence. "What? I'm just being practical. Waste is terrible, especially for people who appreciate every little thing." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through glass. Brady pushed back his chair slightly. "Mom, that's enough." His voice trembled, a mix of anger and humiliation. I raised a hand, gently stopping him. "It's all right, son." Then I looked at Cynthia and said quietly, "You're right. Waste is terrible. I'll gladly take them." Her smirk deepened, thinking she'd won some kind of unspoken battle. She placed the tray in my hands like a charity donation. Sailor looked heartbroken. "Dad, please," she whispered to Brady. But he was too stunned to move. I stood up slowly, the tray balanced in my hands. "Thank you," I said simply. "It's been enlightening." And with that, I walked toward the door, each step echoing across the marble floor. Cynthia called after me, "Oh, don't forget your cookies. The staff will love them." I turned back just enough to meet her eyes. "Actually," I said softly, "I think they'll taste better with someone who knows gratitude." Then I walked out. The night air outside was cold, sharp, and honest, the opposite of what I'd just left behind. I sat in my car, the tray on the passenger seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Inside, I wasn't angry. I was disappointed, not just in them, but in how easily my son had let it happen. But fate has a way of flipping the script on the proud, and karma, I've learned, never skips a meal. Because the very next moment, when I looked back through the mansion's window, I saw something that made me pause. The waiter shaking his head, Cynthia's card in his hand, Martin frowning in confusion. And I knew right then, the night wasn't over. I had just placed the tray of leftovers on the passenger seat of my old Honda when my phone buzzed. A message from Brady. "Dad, please don't leave yet. Something's happening." Something in my gut told me to wait. Through the wide dining room windows, I could still see the elegant table glimmering under that chandelier. The staff had returned, but instead of clearing dishes, they were clustered near Cynthia, who now looked uncomfortable. I stepped out of the car, leaning casually on the hood, watching from the driveway. Inside, Cynthia's confident laughter had disappeared. She was rummaging through her designer purse, her expression turning sharp. Martin fumbled with his wallet, his usual arrogance melting away. The head server, polite but firm, spoke quietly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the card keeps getting declined. Perhaps you could try another." Cynthia laughed nervously, glancing at the guests around her. "That's impossible. Run it again. It must be your system." He nodded and tried again. The same quiet beep, declined. Now the room's energy shifted entirely. Martin's face flushed red. "Try mine," he barked. Another beep, another decline. Brady and Sailor sat frozen, whispering to each other. I could almost hear the words through the glass. "This is insane. What's going on?" The staff exchanged awkward glances. The same woman who'd snickered earlier about people who appreciate leftovers was now offering to bring out a calculator. That's when I walked back in. My shoes clicked softly on the marble, every step echoing through the stunned silence. Cynthia's head snapped toward me, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "Davon, you didn't leave?" I set the tray of leftovers back down on the table. "No, I realized I forgot something." Her voice faltered. "Well, we're having a little technical issue with the payment. These things happen." "Of course they do," I said calmly. "Even to people who never waste anything." Martin bristled. "We don't need your commentary, old man. The restaurant knows who we are." The manager, standing by awkwardly, finally spoke. "Sir, with all due respect, we'll need a working payment tonight. Policy." Cynthia's confidence cracked completely. "Fine, just give me a moment." She turned to Brady, her voice suddenly soft. "Brady, sweetheart, could you cover the bill for now?" Brady blinked. "Mom, I didn't bring my wallet. You said you'd take care of it." Sailor looked mortified, whispering, "Mom, please stop making this worse." The silence stretched. All eyes slowly drifted toward me. I took a slow breath, stepped forward, and pulled my wallet out. "Let me take care of it," I said quietly. Cynthia's jaw tightened. "Oh no, Devin, that's unnecessary." I handed my card to the manager before she could finish. "Please, run this one." He nodded, swiped it, and within seconds the screen flashed, approved. The sound that followed, that soft confirmation beep, might as well have been thunder. The entire table stared. Cynthia's mouth hung slightly open. The manager smiled politely. "Thank you, Mr. Davin. Would you like us to add a gratuity?" 20%, I said simply. Cynthia's voice trembled. "You had that kind of money?" I looked at her, not with anger, but with calm, measured disappointment. "Let's just say, I've never believed wealth should determine a person's worth." Martin frowned. "Who are you, really?" I smiled faintly. "Just a man who worked hard, stayed humble, and doesn't judge people by their clothes." Then I turned to Brady and Sailor. "I'll be outside." As I walked out again, I heard Sailor whisper, "Mom, what did you just do?" The air outside felt lighter this time. I got back into my car, watching through the windshield as the family scrambled to save face. For years, I'd kept my success quiet because I wanted Brady to build his own life without handouts. But tonight, seeing how quickly people with wealth could look down on those they assumed had none, I realized something. It wasn't humility they lacked. It was humanity, and they'd just failed the test they didn't even know they were taking. By the time Brady and Sailor stepped outside, the night had settled into a deep quiet. The city lights shimmered on the horizon, painting soft reflections across my windshield. Brady approached slowly, his voice trembling. "Dad, I didn't know they'd treat you like that." "I swear." I raised a hand gently. "Son, you don't need to apologize for their behavior. I just wanted to see what kind of people your future in-laws were. Sailor stepped forward, her eyes full of shame. Mr. Davin, I'm so sorry for how my parents spoke to you. That's not... I looked at her kindly. I know you didn't share their arrogance, Sailor. You've got a good heart. But sometimes, love makes us blind to the truth about those closest to us. Just then, the front door opened again. Cynthia and Martin came out, their confident smiles nowhere to be found. The chill in the air seemed to cling to them as they walked toward me. Cynthia forced a strained laugh. Well, that was quite an evening. I'm sure this was all just a misunderstanding. Martin crossed his arms. Yes, let's not make a scene. These things happen. I leaned back against my car, eyes calm but unflinching. A misunderstanding? You humiliated me at your table, offered me your scraps, and treated me like I was beneath you. All because you assumed my worth by what I wore. Cynthia's mouth opened, then closed again. She had no defense. Sailor looked at her mother with tears in her eyes. Mom, how could you? But I didn't stop there, because it was time for the truth. I never told my son about my income, I began quietly. I wanted him to grow up humble, to understand that character matters more than money. I live simply by choice, not by circumstance. Cynthia frowned, trying to regain control. Income? What income? I reached into my jacket and pulled out a sleek black ID card, embossed with the logo of Rocky Mountain Renewable Energy. My name is Davin Hales, Regional Director of Operations. I oversee projects from Colorado to California. My team manages assets worth over $2 billion. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. I earn $48,000 a month, I continued. My tone still calm, almost gentle. That's after taxes. I could have shown up in a Tesla, a custom suit, and designer shoes. But I didn't, because real wealth isn't about showing off. It's about knowing who you are when no one's watching. The only sound was the faint hum of the wind. Martin swallowed hard, his arrogance cracking. You're lying. I met his eyes steadily. Would you like me to call the company? I'm sure my CFO would love to verify it. He looked away. Cynthia tried to speak, but her voice broke. Why would you pretend to be poor? Because people's true colors show when they think you have nothing to offer them, I said softly. And tonight yours were very clear. Brady stood frozen, a mix of pride and sadness in his eyes. Sailor, trembling, turned to her parents. Now do you see? This is the man you looked down on. The man who raised the person I love. Cynthia's lips quivered. Davin, I didn't mean to offend you. I nodded, maybe not intentionally. But condescension wrapped in kindness is still cruelty. You should remember that. There was nothing more to say. I turned toward Brady. Son, if you and Sailor truly love each other, make sure you build your future on respect, not appearances. Sailor nodded firmly, tears glistening in her eyes. I promise, Mr. Davin. As I opened my car door, I paused one last time and looked at Cynthia. You were right about one thing. Leftovers shouldn't go to waste. But it seems tonight the lesson didn't go to waste either. Then I got in, started the car, and drove off into the Denver night, leaving their silence behind like a closing door. Inside that car, I finally allowed myself a faint smile, because sometimes the quietest man in the room is the one who carries the loudest truth. The Denver skyline shimmered in my rearview mirror as I drove home, headlights cutting through the quiet streets. The night was cold, but inside that old Honda, I felt nothing but warmth, the kind that comes from knowing you stood your ground without raising your voice. The tray of leftovers sat beside me, untouched. Funny how something meant as an insult had become a symbol, not of shame, but of truth. When I reached my apartment, I parked in my usual spot beneath the flickering streetlight. My building wasn't grand, peeling paint, creaky steps, but it was mine. It kept me grounded in a world obsessed with appearances. I took the leftovers upstairs and placed them on the counter. The smell of rich food filled my small kitchen, mixing with the faint hum of the refrigerator. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down, and exhaled deeply. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Brady. Dad, Sailor broke down crying after you left. She told me she's ashamed of how her parents acted. She said she doesn't care about money. She just wants to learn how to be the kind of person you are. I smiled faintly, reading it twice. Then came another message. Also, Mom and Dad both want to apologize to you personally tomorrow. They said they've never felt so small in their lives. For a long moment, I just sat there, letting the quiet fill the room. I thought about all the years I'd spent hiding my wealth behind simplicity. People often mistook humility for weakness, But tonight proved that sometimes humility is the greatest armor a person can wear. Because when pride collapses, humility stands tall. I texted back, "Tell Sailor she doesn't owe me anything." Her heart spoke louder than their egos ever could. As for her parents, time will teach them what my words couldn't. Brady replied almost instantly, "You're a better man than I'll ever be." I smiled again. "No, son," I whispered to the empty room. "You'll be better. Because you'll remember this." I looked around at my modest apartment. The same chipped mug on the counter. The same worn-out furniture. It wasn't wealth that made this place feel rich. It was peace. The peace that comes from knowing you never have to prove your worth to anyone who can't see it. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I opened the window slightly. The cool breeze swept in, carrying the faint scent of rain and pine. I glanced out toward the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Cynthia and Martin were probably realizing the cost of their arrogance. And for once, I didn't feel angry or superior. I just felt sorry for them. Because money can buy chandeliers, fine dinners, and marble floors. But it can't buy class. And it sure as hell can't buy character. As I turned off the lights, I whispered a quiet thought into the dark. Let them keep their mansions. I'll keep my peace. And for the first time in years, I slept with a smile. Not because I'd won anything, but because I'd proven that dignity needs no stage, no applause, and no witnesses. It just is.